Hello guys, this is your friend Shinobi Nexix 2.0 and we are back in new fanfic. What if Naruto was betrayed by Konoha and became a king part 2? Kazuma watched in unseen interest from the shadows of the Grand Hall, the events that began to transpire. As he watched the doors open at the far end, causing all those in the court to turn their attention to the new arrivals. As he watched a group of civilian-looking shinobi walk into the halls, escorted by the demon lord and palace guards. As he watched the reactions of the court, all there present wondering who they were, and if they were dangerous to the empire. As he watched their face turn from nervousness into complete shock as they walked towards the throne, disbelief as of who was sitting on the throne. Kazuma would never admit it, but he was interested in how Naruto would react to this current situation. How he would react to seeing those who were his former comrades. When he joined Naruto, it wasn't out of loyalty, like so many others did, that he does as he is commanded. He has seen so many other so-called heroes come and try to bring peace to this side of the continent, but it has always failed. The small segment that was Eastern countries was soft, in his eyes, was not used to war like the majority of the continent was. Sure, they had some long wars, but never the constant fear that in the middle of the night your city would be attacked. While that small pocket was able to gain peace, the rest, the majority of this land, was still at war. Until now. That is the reason why he follows Naruto. He is watching him, seeing the tests of rulership being brought before him, and how the young one would react. Seeing those who he once knew once again, this was merely, to Kazuma, another test for the emperor. It seemed time just stood still, as the members of the Konoha team gazed upon in shock, the emperor of the Western Empire, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. The same Naruto banished from their home 7 years ago. And boy, he looked as mad as hell, and by all rights he had good reason to. Here was a team, sent by the place he despised with nearly his whole being, coming into his realm without his consent, and made up of some of the people he hated most in that place. Kakashi truly was a hypocrite. He spoke about friendship, and those who broke the rules are trash, but those who abandoned their comrade are worse than trash. He turned back on his own saying, leaving him alone to train his precious Uchiha. He couldn't stand this fool. He even turned his back on him when he brought the Uchiha back, which caused him to hate his former sensei even more. Sakura was just as bad, always calling him a baka and never once showed any gratitude to saving her from Gaara. Thinking about it, maybe he should have let his good friend kill her, since she was so pathetic. Looking at her now, he realized how much of a fool he had been to waste him time on this pink-haired banshee, when he could have spent it with the girl that truly mattered to him. Hinata Hyuga. Next to his former teammate was the idiot Kiba. Always going into things headfirst. But looking back he saw he wasn't any better. But it angered him that this dog lover was one of the first to turn his back on him. For that, he would never forgive him. Kurenai he had real no problem with, but then again he never knew her. But he did know that every time she saw him, she would look down on him with disgust. She was like everyone else, blind and pathetic, hurting a child to cure her own problems. Shino was hard to tell, but he was sure that he was like all the others. Even when they were in the academy, Shino would stay away from him, as if he was afraid. The last member was one he never though he would see again, Hinata. He could still remember the day she confessed her love for him, the day he had to leave. Out of everyone there, she was the only one who stayed with him. He couldn't believe himself being so blind not to see the signs she loved him, begin so engrossed with Sakura. Now he regretted it, but looking into her eyes he found no hate. Maybe there was a chance to bridge the new divide made by the long, 7-year absence. However, he had other matters that needed his attention, such as the reason why they were here in first place. Naruto's eyes gazed around the hall. He could hear the whispers of shock and astoundment of this group, from Konoha, who were from Fire Country, who had the audacity to try and sneak into this empire, our empire, his empire. He could hear the glares some were giving the group as they stood in the center of the hall, much like what the villages of Konohagakure would give him. How fitting. He could see all the remaining nobles of the land. Those few who actually joined him rather than falling in a pathetic attempt to stop his ambition. Now they were just essentially a group of yes men, all trying to remain on his good side to save their own skin, and their own self-interests. He could see the members of the House of Representatives and of the Senate. He knew that those elected by the common masses, as well as those of specialist fields, would not want to go to yet another war without good reason. He also knew that the speakers of those houses would be watching intently on any decision he made. While he had absolute power politically, he knew that the true power lied with the people. It was important to keep them on board regardless of the decision. He could also see his cabinet amongst those with the masses in the hall. Once they knew who this group was, they all amongst the members of this hall would be most interested in his reaction, and how he dealt with this situation. Most of all, he could see the old war hawk's eyes bear this sight intently. It seems that Yoshimoto was wanting to see if he would be soft on these intruders. How amusing. Either way, this ninja team was trespassing on foreign soil without his permission, and he would make them understand that there are consequences. Then again, the fear of the consequence would be greater than the actual act, if done correctly. The Konoha team on their half were scared, very scared. They could see the hatred that dwelled the blonde's blue orbs, but what scared them more is that he could easily get his revenge on Konoha, and they wouldn't be able to stop him. Looking to their side, they could see the Kyuubi in human form grinning like a madman. But what scared them even more was all the delegates from around the empire, members of the 3 branches of the empire's government, give cold glares at the fact that had the audacity to come to this place, now with hindsight, knowing they would be unwelcome. They could hear to coarse whispers about them, and some were pretty damn insulting. Kyuubi on his part was obviously enjoying their discomfort, a discomfort that they had made themselves. Here Konoha was about to find out, firsthand, at how big a mistake they had made. After all actions have a consequence. The Konoha team were obviously disheartened at the face of seeing their biggest mistake come and hit them back on the head, but they had to stay focused. Maybe there was a chance of him helping Konoha, though it would most likely be at a heavy price. Snapping out of his stupor, Kakashi quickly went into a kneeling position, a sign of respect for one's great superiors. The others quickly followed his example. How it must have felt for them to face their mistakes, by submitting to the one you scorned your whole life. Your Imperial Majesty, Kakashi spoke, trying to sound as calm as possible. Looking back, he now wished he had been there for the boy in his most needed moment, since he wouldn't be in this situation now. How he wished he listened to his own words, now he had to face his old student. It's true what they say, the past always catches up with you. Allow me to apologize for our rude intrusion on your lands, and allow me to explain why we have come here seeking your counsel. Kakashi hoped that Naruto would let him explain the reason for coming into his realm. The voices of those watching once again began to start up again, this time the tone more inquisitive than insulting. Looking up, he could see the blonde gaze into him, searching for any hidden secrets. It was there he realized that standing there wasn't his former student, but now someone who was a shrewd and powerful ruler of the most powerful nation on the elemental continent. The blonde stood up from his throne and walked slowly down the steps towards the team. This action caused the whispers around them to cease. I would advise you to speak quickly. The cold tone of his voice was enough to make Kakashi and the others flinch. Well, it was now or never. At this moment our village is beset by 3 enemies, Kumo, Oto, and Iwa. Your Imperial Majesty, if this war continues in the flow it is currently going, then Konoha will surely fall. Not only that, Your Imperial Majesty, but our land of H no Kuni is beset by the lands of sound, earth and lightning, with the support of several other countries. If this war was to escalate into complete conflict, we will not survive. Great sire, we deeply ask of your aid in this war. If you were to join us as an ally in this war, not only will we stand a good chance of survival, but also maybe the war will end without any more blood being spilt. Your Imperial Majesty, I beseech you to aid us in our time of need. I am sure that the Council, and the Daimyo, will pay any price you wish to send, so please Emperor of the West, help us. At the end Kakashi was practically begging. His voice easily told Naruto of the plea to send help to a losing contestant in a war. How he hated to see a grown man grovel. Tell me Kakashi Hatake, the Jonin looked up to see Naruto hard eyes staring at him, what could I possibly gain in the long term that would prove to be beneficial to my empire? Though it was a clear and simple question, the answer eluded Kakashi. Another voice spoke up for his defense. Sire, I am sure that an alliance between both your empire and our country would greatly improve the ways of life for both countries, and I am also sure that both our realms would learn greatly from one another, for I'm sure that in the long term, an alliance between our nations would allow both to prosper. Kakashi silently thanked Kurenai for the response, but soon felt sorry for her when he saw Naruto turn his hard gaze towards her direction. Is that so Kurenai Yuhi? He asked her. He didn't wait for a response as he quickly turned around and walked back up to his throne. You know what I see Kakashi? He asked, as he sat back down, his voice betraying no emotion. I see a group of pathetic ninja, from a village that dug itself its own grave. At this the team looked at the young emperor in shock, but he wasn't finished. I see a group of ninja who want me to waste my time, resources, and manpower on a war that doesn't concern me in any way. I see a group of ninja who want me to get involved with a village that scorned my very existence from the day I was born into this world. I see a group of ninja who want me to get involved with a village that betrayed and banished me for doing my duty. The last part was said with such anger even the Kyuubi himself flinched from the anger Naruto was releasing. He knew Naruto would never forgive Konoha, and he knew of the anger that burned inside the boy, being kept inside for so long, it was all getting released now. I can name only one person who didn't turn her back on me. I can name only one person who didn't leave me when I needed my friends the most. I can name only one person who never saw me for what I held inside. The rest of you left me when I needed you at my most vulnerable point. I can say only one person in your group was that only person in the whole village who treated me as a human being. Naruto left time for his words to sink in, letting them know how he felt when they turned against him. Then he decided to drop the bombshell. I will not give Konoha aid in any way, shape, or form. I will let you shrivel in the mess that you created. I will not save you from your own destruction. The Konoha team looked horrified at what Naruto said. He wouldn't help them. He actually sounded like he wanted them to fall to ruin. But he wasn't done yet. As for your trespassing of my domain, you will all be sent to the palace dungeons for the night. Tomorrow you will be escorted by my men to the borders to return to your village for your defiance. Should I find that you have entered my lands again, you will not return to your home alive. Take them away from my sight. The 10 samurai that followed them from the entrance then grabbed each of the team, and took them down to the dungeons below. No one put up a fight, too mortified at what Naruto had said to him or her. Not only would he not help them, but also he would kill them if they were found in his lands again. Sakura however managed to find her voice, and tried to call out to her former teammate, trying to make him see reason. But her words fell on deaf ears as he watched them be taken down to the cells. Not one person however saw the lone tear that slid down his cheek. Silence filled the hall after the doors slammed shut. The emperor gave a sigh. Before sitting back down on his throne, the tear was allowed to freely drop down his chin before he wiped it away. Your Imperial Majesty, Naruto looked up to see who was addressing him. It was Kome. The middle-aged man looked quite concerned. Is His Imperial Majesty all right? Naruto couldn't help but smile. I'm fine, Lord Kome, he addressed his chief of staff. Thank you for your concern. I take it that your Imperial Majesty has not decided to get involved in this war. As I said, Lord Kome, I won't waste the resources of the Empire in a war that does not concern us. Until I see sufficient evidence that shows that we are in danger of being under threat, I will not take part in the war in the East. Before Kome could reply, however, another member of the Imperial Court involved himself. But your Imperial Majesty, after the Land of Fire goes, there will be no sufficient power in the small, Eastern Bloc to face this Northern Alliance. It was the Speaker of the Senate. He was a middle-aged man who actually quite wise, and for that, he was ideal to be the representative for them in his cabinet. If this alliance actually lasts long after Konoha's demise, and with the Land of Fire subjugated, then there could be a chance they could perceive us as a threat and target us afterwards. Naruto smiled. Good to see he had some intelligent men in court. Others, on the other hand, were shocked that one would go against the Emperor's verdict. Speaker of the Senate, are you defying the will of the Emperor not to involve ourselves in this war? The Lord Speaker of the Lords asked in a condescending tone. A part of Naruto hated that old man, simply because he was a pompous fool at times. However, compared to the other nobles, he was by far more tolerable. He was a man who had great intellect, but his pride as a noble member was his vice. Luckily, he was one of the few who were able to rein it in, as seen when he submitted himself to Naruto as his ruler. I am not going against the will of our Emperor, Lord Speaker of the Lords, was the old man's reply. What I am afraid of the Northern Alliance, upon seeing us as a united empire, will see us as a threat. It is not just whether or not we involve ourselves in this war, it is also the fact that this alliance, fearing our power, might want to strike first. Furthermore, if they see that a Konohagukare team came from our lands, then their suspicion will increase. Your Imperial Majesty, I humbly request that we prepare ourselves for the worst. Naruto could see that many in the Grand Hall seemed to agree with him, seeing men from all three houses nodded their heads in agreement. Your request is noted, Speaker of the Senate. He turned to the old war hawk in his cabinet. Lord Yoshimoto, at this said man stood at attention. Send word for the Second Imperial Legion to reorganize for a potential attack from the east. I'm sure old Shimazu of the First Imperial Legion will be able to cope with the Siren Empire. The combined might of the Second and Third Imperial Legions should be adequate to deal with any threat coming from the Northern Alliance. Yoshimoto Niseki bowed his head in acknowledgement. While I highly doubt they will attack us, due to the alliance being merely one of convenience, it doesn't hurt to be prepared. At seeing the questioning looks of the court, Naruto thought it best to explain. The lands of Earth and Lightning have historical grievances with the Land of Fire. Similarly, the ninja villages of Kumo and Iwa have historical grievances with Konoha. The smaller countries that have joined this alliance feel threatened by Hi-no Kuni's former supremacy, and thus hope to disperse it, and gain some land in the process. Orochimaru, the leader of this alliance, has used that to gain this force so he can crush Konoha, nothing more. After the Land of Fire has been subjugated, and Konohagukare has been destroyed, I would be deeply surprised if the alliance lasted long after their objective has been fulfilled. At this, the court began to understand the Emperor's logic of not getting involved. After the defeat of Fire Country, when the alliance dispersed, the balance of power in the Eastern Bloc would revert to normal, only that there would be 4 great powers instead of 5. Still, the fact that afterwards each country would be on its own again, none of them would prove to be a sufficient threat to the Empire. But, in the chance they were to attack the Empire, however small, at least they would be prepared. After understanding the reason of not involving themselves, the court began to feel relaxed, and reverted to what they were doing before the little fiasco happened. Naruto stood on the edge of a large balcony in the Imperial Palace, thinking of the events that transpired today. He was shocked to see that even after all this time, Konoha would think he would help them. The arrogance. He hated Konoha with nearly his entire being. They had turned on him, betrayed him, used him for their own, selfish purposes, then just threw him away when he was no longer needed. How he hated them. He had no reason to help those that abandoned him after all this time. But he also felt it was his duty to help Konoha. After all, he promised long ago to protect it, and he never went back on his word. That was another promise he had made when he was a kid. How naive of him to think he could keep every promise he had made. This was a war that didn't involve him or his country, and so he chose to stay out of the war. Even looking at their faces brought back unwanted memories of his past treatment. Kiba humiliating him, Kakashi ignoring him, Sakura hurting him, Hinata confessing to him. That what hurt the most, knowing that Hinata was always there for him. If he had just talked to her and got to know her better, then maybe his days in Konoha wouldn't have been as bad. But then, her father might not have approved of their relationship. He was after all a lowly orphan, a demon child, an abomination in their eyes. He knew he was an arrogant fool. He looked up at seeing the sun beginning to set. The day was near enough over, and tomorrow would start anew. Hopefully he would never see the ninja from the village hidden in the leaves ever again. You seemed troubled. A female voice brought him out of his thoughts. Turning around, he saw Yukie, Mitsuhide and Kyubi standing near the entrance to the room he was dwelling in. I still don't know whether to stay ignorant or play the unsung hero. A part of me says not to help Konoha for everything they did to me. But another part of me tells me to help them anyway, he stated. Yukie frowned. Even now she never liked how Konoha treated him. Sure, it was a good place to be in, but after finding out how they could treat a child, she was reluctant to go there again. Human nature was awful at times. Remember Naruto, all paths have their gains and consequences. While I do not like Konoha, I hate Orochimaru even more. So if you do decide to go into war, then I will stay by your side, Kyubi said. Naruto smiled. He could always rely on Kyubi when he needed support. Looking back, it was Kyubi that essentially helped him in every predicament he was in. He felt bad on relying on his friend so often, and a part of him wondered why he decided to stay with him after all this time. Thanks. You enjoyed that little show, didn't you? Kyubi smiled his traditional cruel smile in return. It's not every day you see some of Konoha's finest cower before someone who is superior to them. Their daimyo is good for that, but seeing them cower before a foreign lord is far more satisfying to watch. Naruto turned around again and gazed over the city in which he inhabited. He looked at all those walking in the streets. He watched as shops began to close, turning it in for the day, and relax for the night before work begins anew the next morning. He saw children with their parents, laughing and having fun, enjoying the tranquil life he had blessed them all with. He had worked so hard to bring peace to this side of the continent, to his empire, and was working to bring it to greatness, so everyone within would prosper. To see the other in such a state. I will only enter this war if I has a very good reason to, the blonde said. Kyubi and Yukie looked slightly puzzled. He turned to face them. At this moment I have no real reason to go to war. This time I put my country before my heart. As he said that, he however remembered something. His eyes widened in realizing what it was. Now he had a chance to find out something, which had bothered him ever since he left Konoha 7 years ago. He had to know. In a single motion he spun around and with pace, started walking past the 3 other inhabitants of the room and out through the door. This sudden move caught said inhabitants of guard. Where you going, Naruto? Kyubi asked. Yukie and Mitsuhide were thinking the same thing. The reply caused the former to smile, and the latter to wonder. There is a certain person I've been meaning to get reacquainted with for the past 7 years. Mitsuhide. Your Imperial Majesty. The old servant asked. running out the room to catch up with the teenage emperor. There is someone I want you to fetch. It had been only several hours since they were thrown into the dark prisons under the palace. To the team from Konoha, however, it seemed like an eternity. An eternity for them to reflect on their past misgivings to their former comrade turned enemy turned emperor, and how it was their fault that they now laid in this predicament. Not a single word was spoken, as none could get over the fact that Naruto had not only rejected their plea for help, but also threatened them with death should he see them again. Sakura was hugging her knees, muttering unheard apologies to her former teammate, the teammate she betrayed. Kiba just sat quietly, looking lifeless as he stared at the wall. Kakashi had tears down his face, finally realizing how stupid he had been to abandon Naruto on so many occasions. Shino, like Kiba, just sat quietly on the ground, keeping himself to himself. Kurenai was trying desperately to comfort Hinata, who at this moment in time believed Naruto hated her after the way he was treated back in Konoha. You know we are the reason why Naruto has turned out like this, Kurenai spoke, finally breaking the silence. Kakashi turned his tearful gaze to her. But he is, after all, Konoha's most unpredictable ninja. Kakashi did a haunting laugh at the comment. He isn't Konoha's ninja anymore, Kurenai, he replied, and it's all Konoha's fault on the whole. We left him. We abandoned him. The Genjutsu mistress signed in displeasure. Mind you, only Naruto could perform a miracle like this. To unite a vast, war-torn land in such a short amount of time, and turn it into what possibly could be the most powerful country on the continent, if not the only empire on this continent. That truly is a great feat, she stated, impressed how Naruto had managed to make a powerful ruler. Thinking about it, he really would make a great Hokage if he was given the chance. Not only that, he also has the Kyuubi under his command, and the people themselves look ready to die for him if he asked. Loyalties like that is something we shouldn't take lightly, Shino spoke, and both older ninja couldn't help but nod in agreement. Suddenly they heard a roar in anger, and turned to see Kiba standing up and punch the wall, hard enough to cause his knuckles to bleed. Damn, I haven't felt this bad in all my life, he growled out. I thought he was the Kyuubi. That was what my mom said he was after the secret got out. But after seeing both of them at the same time, looking nothing like each other, acting nothing like each other. Damn, he clasped to the ground. Some friend I was. And we made him like this, Kiba, Sakura managed to say, still upset by what had happened. It's all our fault. I used to blame him for bringing Sasuke-kun back like he did, but now I realized he had no other choice. And I didn't see that because I was blinded by the fear of what he contained. Sakura seemed to be nearly crying rivers at the guilt she felt. Looking at her former teammate, hatred in his eyes, did she finally realize what she had done to him? Looking back to when they were together, she also realized how she never treated him with kindness. Now she wished that she could go back in time and be there for Naruto for all those years. Hinata didn't say anything in the conversation, as she was still trying to pull herself together after the incident with Naruto. She wished now that she had confessed to him much earlier, and cursed her shyness. She also wished that she went with Naruto, but she knew if she did that, then her father would not stand for it. She now believed that he hated her like all the rest. She was brought out of her thoughts by a comforting voice. Hey Hinata. She looked up to see Sakura smiling down at her. Don't be upset, I'm sure Naruto doesn't hate you. You are the only one who stayed by him, remember? Hinata wiped her tearful eyes. He's got no reason to hate you. I'm sure the glare he gave was directed at us, don't be so hard on yourself. In fact, I would say that he still cares deeply about you. Hinata smiled at Sakura's gentle words. She now felt reassured. Thanks, Sakura. The pink-haired nin smiled. But the conversation was interrupted by the dungeon doors opening with a loud noise. Then, footsteps could be heard faintly in that direction, getting louder and louder. Finally, the footsteps stopped at their cell. The person was one of the guards that they saw to be one of the original 10 that sent them here in the first place. He turned to face them, a clawed glare gazing over them. Which one of you is Hinata Hyuga? They were surprised. What did they want with her? Hinata raised her shaking hand, afraid of what could happen. The guard nodded. His Imperial Majesty would like to see you. This was a shock. Naruto wanted to see Hinata. Maybe Sakura was right. Hinata got up and quickly walked to the cell door. The guard unlocked the door and allowed Hinata to get out, before closing and locking it again, but not before hear Sakura saying, "God get him Hinata." With that, Hinata smiled at her teammate, and then the heiress followed the palace guard to where Naruto wanted to see her. Naruto strode through the palace halls to his destination, his 12 guards marching behind him. With Mitsuhide off to do as he asked, he made his way to his chamber to prepare for his guest. A part of him hoped that what he had planned succeeded, as his guest was still quite important to him, even after all these years. When he turned the corner, however, he nearly bumped into an old monk, one that he knew well. Said monk almost had a heart attack. "Ah, Your Imperial Majesty, I am terribly sorry about that," he spoke, bowing low. Naruto just waved it off. "It's okay, Kiyomasa. I wasn't looking where I was going," he replied to the cabinet minister of religion. The old man just smiled his usual smile that was normally on his face. "I take it Your Imperial Majesty is off in a hurry," the teen gave a smile in reply. But then the monk hit home. "I sense Your Imperial Majesty has been troubled." At this, Naruto sighed. "I first sensed it at our cabinet meeting, but upon seeing those ninja this afternoon, I knew there was conflict inside." He spoke in a soft tone, his hand gesturing to the emperor's chest, to his heart. "I don't know what to do, Kato-san. My mind tells me not to get involved in this war, as it has nothing to do with us. My heart tells me, however, to help Fire Country, despite what they did to me in the past." The monk nodded his head in understanding. Bonds can never truly be severed, broken maybe, but even bonds that have been gone for decades, given enough time, can heal the ties lost in the past. Your Imperial Majesty, however, also must take the matters of those under Your Imperial Majesty's hand, and thus when there is a conflict of interest, a choice must be made. Naruto was glad to know someone who spoke matters of personal value. This is why he was one of the few he completely trusted. "Then what should I do? Which road should I go down?" he asked the old man. The minister bowed in reply. "That, Your Imperial Majesty, is a choice only you can decide. I will say, however, that no matter which choice you take, the cabinet will support Your Imperial Majesty completely." At this, Naruto couldn't help but feel in high spirits that the fact the cabinet would be with him on side, no matter the choice he took. "Thanks, Kato. That's lifted my spirits." The cheery old man bowed once more, his smile on his aged face. "Then Your Imperial Majesty, I will take my leave." With that, the minister of religion walked past the teenage emperor, who in turn walked to his destination once more. All was quiet on the northern border, the wind calmingly blowing across the grass, and whistled the silent tune to those who focused, the tune of nature's call. Battlements stood high to watch any movement on the other side. Then men stood stationary like statues, watching with eagle eyes for anything that could appear. But on this day, nothing was happening, all was quiet. It was too quiet for an old man who surveyed what was before him. The First Imperial Legion stood ready to repel any raids sent by the Siren Kingdom to the north. Like all legions, it was a force of 100,000 men, all well armed, equipped and trained. Divided into 10 cohorts, all 1,000 strong, the First Imperial Legion stood at full strength along with the Second and Third Imperial Legions within the Empire. The First Imperial Legion had a special reputation, however, compared to the others. It was this legion, which was comprised of the men who fought alongside the Emperor during the Wars of Unification. They had stood alongside him since the start of his long campaign, and now were the first proper force to be constructed when the empire was officially completed. Their leader was one of his most trusted commanders, and was honored as being one of the first to join Naruto when he appeared 7 years ago. Yoshihiro Shimazu. The old general stood over the wooden battlements, observing the land below. He was equipped with samurai armor, like all others in the military. He, however, also wore a sleeveless red jacket over his black armor, with the symbol of the empire on his back, that of the imperial eagle holding an ornate shield in its claws. With a small, white beard contrasting his dark skin, Shimazu was a general of experience. That experience was telling him that something was going to happen. Accompanying him was the 1st Division of the Imperial Legion. 10,000 men who were positioned all along the border close to his location. The division was then divided into 10 companies, which were 10, 1,000 men groups. With Shimazu now was the 1st company of the 1st Division. These companies then had specific companies, numbering 10 cohorts that consist of different type of units. Raising his hand high, he signaled the 2 cohorts within an infantry company of the 1st Division of the 1st Imperial Legion, both containing 100 men each, to move to their registered positions and have the archers prepare their bows. The infantry companies were trained to utilize the bow, the spear and the sword. Not specializing in one field but able to use all. The infantry company that came from mobilized their Yari samurai, those armed with spears and katanas to go in front. Behind them another 2 cohorts of bow samurai were positioned behind them, bows ready in hand. Behind them a cavalry company prepared another cohort of 100 to ready their own mounted bow samurai to support the first 2 cohort in front when the need came, while the Yari cavalry cohorts positioned themselves on the flanks. It was not long before Shimazu's fears became a reality. Small groups of cavalry began charging from overhead. The sirens wore samurai armor like the Western Empire, but instead of helmets they wore turbans, which covered their faces. With war cries they charged forward, spears down ready to impale the infantry before them. The infantry, however, calmly drew their bows. Fanatical zealots, the old man cursed with a deep gruff voice, before he yelled, "Fire!" With that order the bows were released. The arrows hurled through their air in their hundreds, before landing on the charging cavalry. The Sarans reeled as they took casualties as the arrows found their way through the armor, killing many of them due to the amount of arrows there. However, they quickly found their cohesion once more, and charged at the infantry once again. The infantry in front of the archer quickly brought their spears low, and the Yari samurai infantry prepared for the charge. The cavalry landed right on top of them, many in front getting impaled by the long, sharp point weapons. The raiders tried to crash through the lines of infantry, but they didn't budge. Years under the old general had granted them a tough will to go with their experiences they had seen, and no matter how hard the raiders pushed, the soldiers of the emperor did not move one step backwards. The fanatics kept up the momentum, regardless of the losses they took, but it was already too late. The amount of casualties they had suffered made what was left insufficient to succeed in their attack. It was soon made worse when the Yare cavalry on either side of the infantry charged the flanks of the invading cavalry. It quickly became a one-sided massacre. Soon, however, Siren infantry began charging over the horizon, like the cavalry wearing turbans to conceal their faces. The old general foresaw this, drew his sword and raised it high. The signal was given for the artillery companies behind to battlements to use their multi-arrow ballistae. Using torsion they fired many more arrows over the battlements and hit the enemy infantry dead on. Using their stumbling momentum to his advantage he signaled for the charioteer cohorts, which formed another company of the 1st Imperial Legion to charge. They appeared around the walls and through the gates. 1,000 teams of 2-man light chariots and heavier 3-man chariots charged at high speed towards the Siren infantry. The Siren infantry tried to prepare for the charge, but were outmaneuvered by the more mobile light chariots. These two men, horse-drawn platforms, fired their bows at individual targets within the compact group, softening the defense while all the time effectively running circles around the group of targets. Then the heavy chariots, also firing bows at the northern raiders, took a more direct approach, as they smashed into the lines. Samurai with spears on the chariots attacked the nearest siren towards them, as the rest broke ranks, and fled. While this happened, the company sergeant of the cavalry company in reserve was given the order to charge the siren archers that were stationed further up the battlefield. With a war cry, the cohorts of cavalry rode from their position outside the wooden battlements to their appointed target. Yari, katana and bow cavalry moved at all haste towards their designated target. They moved past the other areas of combat with increasing speed, and it was only when they were a few hundred yards did the siren archers realize their presence. By the time they drew on their bows, the cavalry were soon upon them. The force of the impact forced the archers to withdraw, only to be cut down on their retreat. Shimazu watched the events with natural eyes. He watched as the men cheered once more as the last of the fanatics was struck down. He watched as the men cheered for the victory they had achieved. He, however, knew that this victory on this skirmish was but a hollow one. The attacks were becoming more and more frequent. Not just here but also along the other areas of the borders. While the rest of the legion was stationed all across the border in their individual divisions kept the raids at bay, and the support of the 2nd Imperial Legion to help bolster the defense lines was a great aid to the defense. He knew that the attacks were just a test of their strength. The real test was soon to come. Sakin Shima of the 2nd Imperial Legion knew this as well. He had already begun to prepare his legion for what could be an attack for the northeast province. Not only that, the Emperor had moved him to that position as there was now an underlying threat coming from the small eastern pocket. While an attack there was unlikely, it seems the Emperor didn't want to take things to chance. He also got reports that the 3rd Imperial Legion was being relocated to the eastern region. Apparently the war in the east could spill over to the Empire, and the Emperor was not taking any chances in being prepared. He couldn't help but smile. It was time for young Yukimura to gain some experience as a legion commander. While he was less experienced than the two veterans commanding the first two legions, he did not doubt the young Sanada's ability to command. Looking at his men, he watched them reorganize into their individual companies. He ordered the cavalry company commanders to move to the location on either side of the battlements, while ordering the charioteer commander to move back to their original location. With a salute, they went back to their men, and they rode off to their new assigned location. While most of the division stood with him, he had to divide his division, and other divisions of the Legion to protect the border on an extended length. While he had fought these raids with only essentially have the strength of a standard Legion, he believed that he owned strategic ability, and the clear stupidity of the Sirens is to only come as raiding forces and not a fully mobilized army. He truly believed he and his Legion could hold the line. Shimazu sighed. It seems that even after the unity of our Emperor's empire granted stability for those that dwell within, there are those who look outside who wish to destroy it. Before he walked back to his command post, he had to prepare for the next raid in this area, and preparing a new strategy of defense against the fanatical Sarans. A muffled knocking was heard outside the door of the Emperor's private chamber. Said Emperor was at this moment in time preparing 2 glasses of expensive red wine. One was for him, the other was for his guest, whom at this very turning to face the large doors, he shouted for them to enter. With a silent creak they opened, revealing one of the Praetorian guards opening the door with his arm, another who was one of the palace guards, and a third person who he was expecting for this evening. The young Emperor of the West smiled brightly as he gazed upon his guest, happy at her arrival. It's good to see you again after all these years, Hinata-chan. You look beautiful. Said Hyuga blushed a deep crimson at Naruto's remark. Even after 7 years of being away from him, she still couldn't control her feelings for her longtime crush. Slowly she walked into the room, one measured step at a time. With a gesture he signaled for the guard to leave them, who in turn bowed in respect before going back to his duties. With that his bodyguard holding the door open moved to close it, with a small clink, to make sure neither of the room's inhabitants was disturbed. Please, take a seat, Naruto motioned for her to sit on the sofa beside him. A blushing Hinata managed to squeak out thanks before she quickly sat down to where the Western Emperor pointed to. She tried a tactic in seeing how close she could get to his while sitting on the sofa, while at the same time be at a safe distance as not to faint. Can I interest you in a drink? He asked in a kind, gentle tone while raising one of the two glasses of red wine. Hinata stiffly nodded her head, unable to find her voice. Naruto just smiled at the reaction. She hadn't changed even after all these years. She was still the shy, yet gentle girl that he had inadvertently ignored throughout his childhood. He passed her one of the two glasses of fine red wine he prepared earlier. She kindly received it with gentle fingers from his hand, and putting it to her lips, tasted the sweet liquid with a single sip. Looking down at the floor, she finally mustered enough courage to talk to her longtime romantic love interest. It's good to see you again and Naruto-kun, she spoke silently, but still loud enough for him to hear. Said blonde smiled more than he had ever smiled in a long time. Those words immediately told him that Hinata still cared about him. With a soft touch he placed his fingers of hers. This action caused her to gasp and go bright red at the fact her crush, her love was actually touching her. Managing to look at his face, she saw that his eyes were filled with sorrow. I deeply apologize for my earlier misconduct to you. I let my anger get the best of me. I didn't mean to scare you, he spoke in a soft tone, which to Hinata was soothing to her ears. Being able to finally relax, she spoke more confidently. I take it that your threat still stands, however? She asked in her usual soft-spoken voice. The blonde opposite her nodded. Your group did walk into my lands with permission, and I didn't know what the reason was for you coming here. I am sorry, but I have to stay out of this war for my people. They have suffered enough war, he told her, but also to himself. He seemed determined to stay at this course of action. Upon seeing her features frown, he realized he had another apology to make. I'm deeply sorry, Hinata-chan, that I never got time to spend some days alone with you. If I had realized sooner how you felt about me, then I would have asked you out on a date. Mind you, that offer's still open. If you are interested. Hinata was both deeply surprised and happy at what she just heard. Naruto did harbor feelings that were similar to her own. He blatantly just asked her out. But then suddenly she frowned, remembering that she had to do something when she got back to the Hidden Leaf Village. Naruto quickly saw the downed look on her face, and became quickly concerned. What's wrong, Hinata-chan? Tears began to form in the girl's eyes, making Naruto even more concerned about his very precious person. He stood up from the couch he sat on, and walked over to sit beside Hinata. Then he wrapped his arms around her in a comforting manner, which she quickly obliged as she cried onto his chest, finding much needed comfort in his arms. After a few minutes she began to calm down. She found her voice again. I've been forced in an arranged marriage with a son to a very powerful noble I don't like, because my clan wants more influence in the court of the fire daimyo. Naruto's eyes narrowed. They always hurt her in some way, shape or form. Now what they did was going too far in his eyes. But to his shock, Hinata wasn't finished. They also did this. She lifted her hand up and revealed to Naruto her forehand. And to his horror, revealed what she bore, the caged bird seal. I'm no longer the heir to my clan, my sister is. They put this seal on me and shoved me into the branch family. They claimed that I was too weak to lead the clan, and my feelings for you would bring dishonor to them. They have even taught the noble's son the sign to activate the seal, just in case I get disobedient. Soon after the explanation, Hinata broke down again. Now Naruto was beyond angry. In fact, he now very close to being like a volcano ready to erupt. But he calmed himself down. No, he was not going to let his anger get the best of him. No, in fact, he was going to get one over the Hyuga clan one last time. Lifting Hinata's head up by cupping her chin with his fingers, he gave the tearful girl a gentle, love-filled smile. Then allow me to remove that burden on you, my dear Haim. Hinata blushed again with the title he gave her. Then, to her confusion, the young emperor closed his eyes, and began to do a long, complex array one-hand signs, while mumbling a strange language. She noticed that the markings on the back on the blonde's white gloves began to glow brightly. Suddenly, he opened his eyes, and with one hand lifting the fringe on Hinata's forehead, with his other hand he pressed 2 fingers onto the center location of the branch seal. He uttered but a single word. Release. A bright, white light covered the girl's brow. But as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving Naruto with a smile on his face. He grabbed a mirror that was nearby and put it in front of Hinata's face, so she could see her reflection. She gasped in great shock at what she saw. What seal? He asked with a humorous tone, while presenting one of his foxy grins. The caged bird seal was no longer there. Hinata for one was too shocked for words. Naruto's smile got bigger. Being a seal master has its advantages. And with me getting the Kyuubi free, that seal was easy to remove. She was too much in awe to say anything. She was free. Free from the curse of the caged bird. But she was also confused on what to be. But what do I do now? Now that you have released me, the Hyuga clan will hunt me to put it back on me. What can I do? She asked with a pleading tone. Naruto merely smiled back and slowly began to lean in, causing Hinata to blush more than she ever did before at how close they were, only a few centimeters apart. She felt his arms encircle her once again, and the smile became one of deviousness. Why don't we worry about that later? He spoke in a seductive whisper. And with those final words he closed his distance, leaving Hinata in sweet bliss for having her longtime dream come true for some time to come. Well, this certainly is an unexpected predicament, I must say, gentlemen, Kome concluded as he watched the 2 lovebirds with a grin. He and the other cabinet members all watched the events, which transpired in the emperor's chamber. How they did it. Kazuma was also among them, using one of his spheres to show what was happening. Many of the cabinet members couldn't help but smile at the fact that the emperor may now have an empress by his side, if she was to stay. By what they heard, however, that may be the case. The Justice Minister Kazuki Chosakabe was not one of those smiling at the events. Isn't the emperor going to be annoyed when he finds out about this? He didn't feel comfortable at watching their emperor's private life. Kyuubi, however, just gave him a pat on the back. You mean if he finds out? The fact that he won't only made the demon fox grin more at the prospect. He always liked to get under Blonde's skin without Naruto knowing about it. Besides, he could be able to use this sentimental event to his advantage. His mind already began to work on ways to get at the blonde emperor. Who is young woman anyway? One of ministers asked. It was a good question, as none here knew of who Hinata was. Well, all except one. Kyuubi would be the one to enlighten the cabinet. Hinata Hyuga is from Konohagakure within Fire Country, as you are all aware. They nodded their heads in reply. She is, well was, the heir of the Hyuga clan within the Hidden Leaf Village, as you just heard. The clan was very influential due to their bloodline, the Byakugan. More on that later. Anyway, she was close to Naruto due to the fact of she being one of the few to hold no ill will of any kind towards him. In fact, as you can see, she was in love with him from a very early age. Due to the fact Naruto has a fierce determination, it gave great admiration for her. The thing is, she only finally confessed to Naruto of her love the day he had to leave, so this is a 7-year delay for those two to get together. One thing I can say for certain is that she has a kind heart, one that is rare as these centuries. At this explanation, they now believed that she would be a great match to their emperor, an empress with a gentle nature beside the strong and determined emperor. A perfect match. Now all we have to do is make sure they do get together, Kome stated. He gave Kyubi a questioning look, along with the other members, when they saw his laughing. Oh, you don't have to do anything, it's all been sorted by those two young lovers already. I assure you, the Demon Lord spoke as he went back to watching the show provided by the Ihe Lord. The team from Konoha had assembled themselves in front of the palace gates. Around them was a large group of samurai that looked to be the ones escorting them back to the border. Already they were wondering what the reactions of those in the village would be when they find out that the Emperor of the West was their former demon vessel. Kakashi signed, he wasn't going to look forward to it. During their dismal night in the dungeons of the palace, they had the chance to think on what could have been if Naruto was not banished, most probably in the same position, but they would have had allies to support their war instead of being on their own in the world. What was interesting to them, however, was the fact Hinata never returned to them after being called out by the blonde. This left many of the group to speculate. Only when they were preparing to leave did she reappear. When asked where she was at for the night, the only reply they got was a deep blush from the Hyuga, who found the floor suddenly very interesting. This got several reactions. Kurenai smiled at seeing the small smile on the girl's face, Kiba gawked at what she did, Sakura also blushed upon realizing what happened, Kakashi gave a perverted giggle, and Shino, well, nothing on the surface. Kakashi surprisingly was the first to recover. Are we ready? He asked everyone. They nodded and were ready to move when a voice stopped them, telling them to wait. Turning around, they saw the Kyubi in human form walking towards them. There has been a slight change in plan. I am to escort you to the border. The rest of you are to return to your original duties. The samurai saluted, then walked off back into the palace grounds. Kyubi turned to face the Konoha ninjas and gave them a cruel, sadistic, and demonic smile. This in turn caused the nin to shiver in fear. They defiantly weren't looking forward to the trip back home. Kyubi just chuckled at their reactions, as he just loved to mess with their heads, making them feel true terror. Shall we begin the journey to the border? He asked. Kakashi reluctantly nodded, and they all proceeded to walk to the city gates. Well, all but Hinata. Kurenai quickly noticed this and turned to the girl. What's wrong, Hinata? She asked. This got everyone's attention, making the rest of the team turn to the shy Hyuga. Said girl was standing very still, her eyes overcast by her dark hair. One swift motion, her fists clenched. I'm not going back. At this statement their eyes widened in disbelief. What? Kurenai asked in deep confusion. Hinata had that determined look in her eye. I'm staying here with Naruto-kun. I'm staying with the person I love. Mitsuhide with a small smile watched in the distance the young emperor of the Western Empire show his new fiancée Hinata Hyuga the gardens outside the palace. He had never seen him smile as much as he did now, for the void in his heart had been filled. The old, chief servant had joined the emperor when he had appeared in the east, only when he began to make his mark, taking a significant area in a small time. Their meeting was one of complete accident when the young boy entered the town where the old man had retired after his unsuccessful campaign with the other members of the Bushido 7. Having met in the inn at the late afternoon, the two got chatting, and soon began to understand each other. Mitsuhide Tsunaka, the old warrior whose dreams of peace were shattered, and Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the young general who sought to unite the western lands in the quest for peace. Mitsuhide could not deny that he was affected by the young boy's charisma, and soon joined him as one of his many advisors. He became one of his most loyal men under his command, and after the war was rewarded with becoming his retainer within his new palace taken from the Kyoto shogun near the end of the Central Region campaign. Ever since he has managed the goings-on within the palace walls, and remains one of Naruto's closest confidants. His smile grew when he saw the two laugh, as Naruto wrapped his arms around Hinata and spun her around. Never before had he seen the young emperor so cheerful. He had always been serious ever since the empire's founding, the burdens of leadership heavy on his shoulders. It seems now he had someone to share his life with in this world. It had been only a few days since the decisive decision on Hinata's part to stay with the Western Emperor, and accepted his hand in marriage. That decision had secured the line of the Namikaze emperors of the Western Empire, and the dynasty was born. It was in the old man's hopes that peace was finally secured within the majority of the continent. Well, things have certainly been interesting these last few days, a voice behind him brought Mitsunade out of his thoughts. Turning around, he saw Kome, the chief of staff of the emperor's cabinet, gazing at the two young lovers. I do hope that this reacquainted love of theirs does not cause the emperor to disregard his duties. At this the chief servant shook his head at the chief's attitude. Yet you were one of those who constantly pushed for his imperial majesty to find a wife. At this Kome chuckled at the memory. When the empire was in its infancy, Kome, along with several other members of the imperial court, tried to secure the line by getting Naruto to find essentially a girlfriend to marry. They tried the direct approach during one of the cabling meetings, handing him a petition to marry. Naruto, however, was not having it. He essentially told them, quite forcefully, he was going to marry someone who he knew when he was ready and would not be forced, pressured, or asked into doing so otherwise. Needless to say, it was dropped soon after. Well, I did what was necessary for the empire. I can see that I won't have to worry about the future of the imperial line. However, I am worried that he will forget his duties as a ruler for the empire, especially since he does a lot of the written work personally. At this, Mitsuhide sighed. He knew about Naruto's trust problems, and did admit to him that he was at times paranoid that were those out to get him, mainly those from the eastern part of the continent that had grudges against him, his deceased mother and father. Let our young emperor enjoy his youth with his fiancée, it is something we yearn to get back. To not let them enjoy their young lives would be hypocritical on our part if we had a chance to get it back. The emperor will not disregard his duties, he is too driven to do that. Currently he is just wishing to be with who he loves. The team from Konoha -1 member, accompanied by the nine-tailed demon fox, the Kyuubi no Yoko, had finally made it the border of the Western Empire, after traveling on the open roads for a few days. While it had been a few days since their meeting with the emperor, their old comrade Naruto Uzumaki, but they were still feeling down on not only failing to get the desperately needed alliance with the emperor to aid them in this war, but also the loss of another childhood friend. Flashback. They could not believe what they just heard. Hinata Hyuga was staying with the Western Emperor, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. But this was suicide because of what her father would try and do. But by the determined look in her eye they knew they weren't going to change her mind. I have nothing left in Konoha. I am hated by my family and by my father. My life would be that of servitude by a man whom I am forced to marry. Nothing is left there for me to come back to. Naruto-kun, however, has offered me to stay here, and has even proposed to me. At this their eyes widened in disbelief. Kyuubi, however, was grinning. All I ever truly wanted was to be with Naruto-kun, now I have that chance, and much more. I will not pass up this chance. Hinata, what do you think your father will do when he finds out about this? Kiba tried to reason with her. While he wouldn't admit it, he did in fact want her to stay here with Naruto, so she would be safe, but he was afraid of what her father, Heishi Hyuga, would do when he found out, and what drastic action he would do to get her back. Shino, however, gave the answer. What can he do? He asked, being the voice of reason and logic like all Aburame did. They all turned to him for an explanation. As such, he decided to clarify, even if he had the manpower to try and get her back, he knows that he would be risking not only war with Naruto, which if happened we would definitely not survive, but also risking the lose of his status in the council for bringing much more problems to Konoha. So she really has nothing to fear from him now. Kiba signed in satisfaction. Looks like she was safe. I admit, while Heishi may be overly arrogant, being the typical Hyuga, even he wouldn't dare try a move like that, Shino finished. The Kyuubi chuckled, catching their attention. If he tries anything I will personally rip him apart, he spoke with a toothy grin. This threat made many of them shiver, primarily for the fact he could literally carry the threat. Hinata. Kurenai started with a serious, yet motherly tone, are you sure you wish to do this? The Hyuga once more nodded her head. As I said, all my life I wanted to be with Naruto-kun. To tell him how I feel, to tell him that I love him. To marry him and be with him forever. Now I finally have that chance, and I won't let anyone, even my father, take that chance away. Kiba walked up to her, and wrapped his arms around her. Well, take care Hinata. But I will tell you now that if he hurts you in any way, I will come here and give him a good beating. Emperor or not, Hinata couldn't help but giggle at her friend's antics, and returned the hug he gave. After he let go, Sakura came up and put a hand on her shoulder. You take care of yourself Hinata. And make sure Naruto stays on the right track. Hinata nodded in reply, a few tears appearing in her eyes. Thank you all for being my friends. And thank you Kurenai, for caring and helping me so much. Her former sensei smiled as she gave a silent farewell to her favorite student. I hope you enjoy your stay here Hinata-san, Kyuubi spoke. Hinata smiled back at the demon. Kakashi turned to the Kyuubi, who nodded as he saw the look in the ninja's eye. Well, I think it's best we get going, he stated. And with that, they set off back to their home village, leaving Hinata behind to start a new, better life with her crush-turned-boyfriend. And soon-to-be husband. End flashback. Now they were wondering about the reactions from the council when they find out about the identity of the emperor, and that the Kyuubi is a free demon, one which could attack Konoha at any time. Secretly they were hoping that they wouldn't do anything or overreact, that it would cause grave consequences, as it would only cause Konoha even more problems. But knowing the history between Naruto, Kyuubi and the village, that would most likely not happen. They knew they would stand little chance at seeing many small forts containing provincial forces for the province. Each containing trained samurai in the defense of the provincial capital or villages. On one particular occasion they saw a large wooden fort with several smaller forts close to the border in the eastern region, only a day's walk to the border patrols. Kyuubi told them that the fort contained the 3rd Imperial Legion, which was at the standard strength of 100,000 men. Needless to say they were both shocked and scared at the force strength. How many of these legions did Naruto have under his command? While they traveled to their destination, there was an awkward silence, as they didn't know what to say or do around the nine-tailed demon in human form. They did wonder if Naruto played a sick joke on them with having him escort them for getting him confused with his former prisoner. But as they went on, the need to converse began to take hold, and thus they slowly began to open up to him, asking him questions, both random and personal, and some of them soon began to have small conversations with him. Sakura was the first to have a long conversation talking about Naruto and how he managed to stay sane all those years. Shino surprised everyone with how much talking he did with the demon lord of the Biju, primarily talking about logical and philosophical debates. Eventually near the end trip, Kyuubi gave them an explanation of the reason why he attacked Konoha, and told them briefly about Madara Uchiha. He also warned them that although the Uchiha was not as strong as he used to be, he could still level a hidden village with ease. To their utmost shock, he also spoke of the theory that he was not only a member of the Akatsuki, but also their true leader. With this knowledge they now saw them much more than a threat than they originally believed. He also, much to Kakashi's surprise, apologized for having his sensei killed. Kyuubi in fact knew Minato long before he attacked Konoha, during the Third Shinobi War. He stated that he had as much respect for Minato as he had for Naruto, and his death was one of his many regrets. Kakashi, now starting to see the Kyuubi in a much different light, decided to try and let the past go, and began to act more civilized to the demon fox, even though it was hard to do at first because of their history. The others followed the Jonin's example, and soon their fear of the demon was near enough diminished. Now it was time for them to leave the demon, and the Western Empire behind, and return to Konoha for its defense. Before they left though, Kyuubi handed Kakashi a red-lined scroll. Naruto asked for this to be delivered to the Hokage. It's for her eyes only. Kakashi nodded in understanding. It was most probably a warning from the Emperor to her. The same warning that he gave them. Now remember Naruto's warning, cause he will keep it. If any of your ninja are found in his lands, they will be killed on sight, regardless of the reason. He doesn't want this war to spill over to his lands, for he wants to protect him people. They looked downcast at what he said. But I will tell you this. Naruto has been debating about helping Konoha for some time. Ever since Jiraiya came and asked him first. So there may be a chance he will help, but I wouldn't put you hopes on it. The Nin group were deeply surprised about this. There was still a small glimmer of hope that Naruto would help Konoha. But it would most probably need to be divine intervention in order him to do that. Well, I think it's time we leave, Kakashi spoke, and with that they crossed the border into Bird Country, so they could cross into Fire Country. Returning home to bring the grave news to the council, and the populace. Emperor Naruto of the West sat in a chair in his office looking over military charts and the status of the military legions both formed and forming. Around him was the Chief of Staff Kome, the Minister of Defense Yoshimoto, and the three generals of the current standing Imperial Legions, Shimazu of the first, Sakin Shima of the second, and Yukimura Sanada of the third. Sakin was a middle-aged man, looking gruff but firm, with a small mustache and a bald scalp, with short black hair on the sides and back of his head. Like Shimazu, he wore complete set samurai armor, wearing a jacket with the Empire's insignia on the back over it. Yukimura was in contrast a young man, being in his mid-20s. Clean-shaven, he had medium black hair with a headband over his forehead and under his hair. He wore the standard general uniform of the other generals of the legions. Right, we need to introduce these new technological weapons to the legions currently created and up and coming. Naruto essentially stated the reason why they were all in his office. Any ideas of the best way to incorporate them? It was Yoshimoto, with his vast military experience, who came up with a solution. Your Imperial Majesty, as you are aware, we have 3 legions, which all have a standing strength of 100,000 men. These are divided into 10 divisions of 10,000 men each. Each division is then divided into companies of 1,000. Here they are specialized into roles: the infantry, the cavalry, the artillery, the charioteer, and the specialization companies. These companies are then divided into cohorts of 100 men each for easier mobilization during the battlefield, and as a unit within the company. Due to the use of these new weapons, being primarily used by gunpowder, it is common sense to equip the artillery companies with these new gunpowder artillery pieces. As for things like grenades, should go for the skirmishers in the infantry companies for now until they are produced in enough quantity that all infantry units can be equipped with them. What new artillery pieces have been constructed? Asked Sakin. Kome pulled out a paper from his file of notes held under his arm. According to the report on the new weapons, we have some new powerful items at our disposal. The list is small, but the weapons are formidable. These are what are called cannons, firing large solid or hollow balls at the enemy. The hollow balls are filled with many small pellets that cause maximum damage to blocks of infantry, while the solid balls are good against defenses. Another new artillery weapon is modification of the ballista. The long-range weapon fires a single large bolt instead of multiple bolt. Using gunpowder as a propellant, fires a single bolt over distances greater than what torsion can provide. The bolt tip is filled with a high explosive form of gunpowder, so when it lands, causes a wide range of damage in the impact zone. Also, the new form of ballista fires twice the amount of arrows, this time using gunpowder as a propellant. Replacement of the torsion system allows for more arrows to be fired. Anyway, these weapons will provide greater fire support for our infantry on the ground. What of the new legions, when will they be ready? Shimazu asked. If things go as planned, the 4th and 5th Imperial Legions will be ready in less than 2 months. The 6th, 7th and 8th Imperial Legions will be ready in 8-month time. When they are ready, our forces, when properly mobilized, will amount to 800,000 men in total, not including provincial defense forces, Yoshimoto replied. With that amount of men we can easily deal with the Siren Empire to the north. At this, Naruto interjected. I would rather deal with the Siren Kingdom diplomatically than use force to subjugate them. Even if we conquer them, their religious zealously will make them a more trouble than they're worth, the young emperor argued. But we must deal with them somehow. 2 of our legions are in the north to keep them under control. The resources needed to keep them at bay are becoming too much, those 2 legions could be used elsewhere. If we get caught in a situation which require more than 1 legion in the time it takes to bring the other legions to full strength, then we could be in a serious situation long term. Yoshimoto argued. It was here that the old war hawk believed war was the answer, as near enough always. The threats from the raiding parties have begun to increase due to the increase in numbers of the raids, and the increased frequency of which they come. It is my assumption, based on my past knowledge of these people, is that the increase of raiding parties in a forerunner to a full-scale assault. If that is to be the case, we will need both legions to drive them back, Shimazu inputted with his previous knowledge of the enemy. Also, if the Northern Alliance in the east also come to attack us, then we will have no combat strength to deal with any other threat that could come upon us. At this, Naruto sighed. This argument was getting nowhere. Then let us hope they don't attack. Either way, I will not commit the Empire's forces against our opponents when diplomacy could still be on the table. Yoshimoto thought to press the matter, but decided not to at this time. As it was clear the Emperor had made his decision, he hoped that he was correct in his assumption. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. Should we replace the current artillery units with these new ones, or should we just add them to the companies? The young Emperor asked. I think it would be best to replace the current artillery units with the new and improved ones. If we have too much variety, then it would be harder to mass produce the necessary ammo for the artillery units. It would be best to have as few variants of artillery as possible to ease the need of supplies, Sakin spoke, knowing that the sinews of war were as important as the warriors fighting on the front lines. I agree, the torsion ballista would now be useless now to use of the gun-powdered variants, there is no need to use outdated equipment, Yoshimoto believed it to be the best course in the long term. How many of these new weapons do we have? Asked Yukimura, worried about the need of supply. I mean, it's all well and good to replace what we have now, but do we have enough to do a full replacement of artillery equipment? Unfortunately, we only have enough of these new weapons to currently be able to fully equip one fully supplied legion. Given the next month, however, supply will pick up to allow others to be equipped as well. These will include the 2 legions up and coming. Kome reported, looking at the figures on the paper. Give the 3rd Imperial Legion priority of supply. If we need to get involved in a conflict, I would like the Free Legion to be fully ready if the time comes. If the Siren Kingdom does decided to go to war, then you have my permission to go on to the offensive, Shimazu and Sakin. Naruto ordered, ending any discussion before it started. His will be done. Hinata sighed in content as she gazed over the balcony overlooking the capital city. It had been several days since she decided to stay here with the one she loved more than anything on this earth. She wore a beautifully embroidered golden kimono that wrapped itself graciously around her figure, and on her finger was a golden ring, symbolizing her engagement to the one she holds close to her heart. Her marriage was to be in a few months, and she couldn't wait. Finally, her biggest dream had come true. She couldn't help but gaze over at the streets, which she observed in the silent evening. She looked at the peace and tranquility that was bestowed by her fiancé's hard work into unifying the land, rewarding the people with peace never seen in centuries. One thing that caught her interest was a child being cuddled by her mother, having fallen and scraped her knee, while the father watched with a smile as he knelt down beside them. This sight made her think about her future with her husband-to-be. Did she want a family? Her hand unconsciously moved to her stomach, and began to think of what could be. She smiled. If they did have child, it would bring them even closer than they are now. This was something she would have to consult with him. You seem quite calm, Your Highness. I hope that your stay here has been to your satisfaction, an old voice spoke out. Turning around, she was met with the smiling chief servant Mitsuhide. She couldn't help but smile back at the old man's friendly demeanor. Everything's been perfect, Mitsuhide. These last few days have been some of the best in my whole life. She looked at her engagement ring, especially since my dream has come true. Mitsuhide noticed the direction of the gaze, and couldn't help but chuckle. You are very lucky. Many girls wanted to have the emperor's hand in marriage, so I would be careful when facing the fangirls. At this, Hinata shivered at the prospect. She couldn't help but remember the academy days with Sasuke and his fangirls. It was never pretty. Then again, after one essentially does the impossible and unites a continent that was engulfed in war for centuries, one will get many admirers. At this, Hinata couldn't help be curious. How did Naruto-kun unite such a large portion of this land and in such a short time? Mitsuhide gave a hearty laugh. Through political maneuvering, military conquest, use of charisma, and fear. After Naruto first made his appearance after defeating Nobunaga Oda in the East, many lords were uninterested in him, merely calling his the Eastern Fool. He soon, however, made his mark after consolidating his position. Making alliances with two lords near his location, he launched 2 attacks simultaneously against 2 other warlords. He led one such attack himself, the other led by the old general Shimazu, who joined Naruto shortly after his rise to power. While he began history of Naruto's rise to power, Hinata sat down on one of the chairs to listen intently to her lover's rise to become one of the great rulers of the continent. It was a gamble, facing 2 foes at once, but it was Kyuubi who essentially granted him victory here. Both warlords were killed and he was the most powerful lord in the region. One of the 2 allies found him to be a threat, and so attempted to assassinate him. It failed and found out who they took orders from. His reply to this attempt on his life was that he took revenge by taking over his territory. The other ally found it more beneficial to join him upon seeing how quickly he gathered power, and thus became his vassal. With these territories around his base secured, he prepared a campaign to take over what is now the eastern region. He didn't use military force, however, he played the warlords against one another. He did this quite cleverly, but simply. He had some of his men dress up the soldiers of the opposing warlords, and they committed raids of military structures and posts. The warlords who were of a hot-headed kind thus fell for the ploy and began to attack those who they thought instigated the attacks. As such, they went to war with one another, while the emperor's forces remained unattached to the war. By the end of their conflict, their forces were heavily diminished by the constant battles. As such, by playing one force against another, it was easy for the emperor to take them over quickly. With that, he had the largest land mass due to all the other smaller warlords and daimyo only controlling small pieces of territory, due to being so many of them. By taking over a whole region, the emperor held significant power in the regions surrounding what was now his growing empire. The fact he did this in just over 6 months caused man to reconsider how much of a threat his imperial majesty was now. No longer was the Eastern Fool looked down on by the other lords and rulers. The fact he now held great power caused many to try and take him out before he could consolidate his position. A first alliance of several daimyo and many warlords stood opposed to him. By the time they gathered a sufficient force to mobilize against the would-be emperor, he had managed to gather his own force to deal with this coalition. While their forces were of near equal size, the coalition was soon to collapse after the crushing defeat on the fields of Yamagawa. The emperor used a combination of speed and mobility over the static forces, which was the tactic of the alliance. After picking off groups of soldiers with hit-and-run tactics, they were forced to move to a prepared ambush site. When lured to the location, the main body of the emperor's army smashed into the main bulk of the enemy force. When hit by the ambush, for opposing forces soon crumbled. Many of the daimyo involved panicked and fled with the remainder of their forces. Their army weakened, the remaining coalition members stood no chance. It was at this point Kyubi made his mark on the battlefield. Appearing at the location of their main camp, he killed many of the warlords and their bodyguards in one swift move. It was here that the battle was concluded. After their defeat, their lands were quickly taken over. The daimyos that managed to escape surrendered, and saw His Imperial Majesty as their new lord. Due to this they were allowed to keep their lands, and thus became vassals so to speak. After this, the only coalition to prove to a threat to the emperor again would be the coalition at the Battle of Nashigiro. Hinata was in awe at what Naruto was capable of, and how his campaign started with such speed. She believed that if he was given the chance all them years ago, Konoha would most probably stand a good chance of survivability. Before the head servant of the palace could continue his story, however, the door behind them opened. Turning to see who entered, the chief servant bowed as the emperor made his appearance. "Is that the story of our campaign I'm hearing?" Naruto asked with a smirk. At this Mitsuhide raised his head, a smile on his face. "Her Highness was wanting to know how your Imperial Majesty was able to unite the countries of the continent." Naruto walked over to Hinata, wrapping an arm around her and pulling her close. Hinata blushed as he gave her a quick kiss on the lips, a smile appearing on his face at how cute his girlfriend looked. "Well, if you're interested, I can tell you all about it. All you had to do was ask." Kakashi and the rest of the team stood at attention, knowing to look smart in the presence of the council, and the Hokage within the Hokage mansion. But to the shock of them, the daimyo was present in the meeting as well, accompanied by his honor guard. He was most probably there in the hopes that the empire would come and save Hai no Kuni. Tsunade's gaze was upon them, her face devoid of any emotion. She had to put her heart away, and do what was necessary to protect Konoha. Judging by the expressions on their faces, it wasn't going to be good, but what she also noticed was that Hinata was NT with them. Something was going on, and she didn't like it. "Report," she ordered, hoping for the best. Giving a sign, Kakashi began his debrief. "Hokage-sama, I'm afraid the mission was a failure. The Emperor of the Western Empire refused to ally himself with us for this war. His reasons included the protection of his people by not getting involved in a war that isn't his to worry about." Kakashi spoke in a calm and collective tone as he possibly could. Many on the council looked to be in uproar. But there is more. At this they quieted down before they could make any real noise. "The Emperor of the West is a former member of this village." This got the entire council on their feet. Even Tsunade looked shocked. The Emperor was from Konoha. "But who is he?" demanded one of the council members. Whoever it was most probably held a grudge against their former home, which could only explain why they didn't join. Kakashi sighed, ready to deliver the bombshell. "The Emperor of the Western Empire is Naruto Uzumaki." Silence filled the chamber. Every member of the council, both civilian and shinobi, looked at the Jonin with shock, disbelief, and fear. Naruto Uzumaki. Tsunade was never so unnerved in her life. She suddenly had a flashback to when she berated Naruto for what he did to Sasuke, and the hurt-filled look on his face when she banished him. It was a big regret that she still wanted to correct. But now Naruto was the emperor of the West. Sasuke on his part was both shocked and happy that his former teammate who was now at the head of a major power. But he was also saddened that it came to this. He must really hate Konoha now not to even send some men for aid. But after what both he and the Hidden Leaf Village had done, he had every right to. It seems in the long term, Naruto had far succeeded him. Why you sure it was him? Shuza asked. If it was him, then they were in deep trouble. Yes, we met him and saw him with our own eyes. He in fact wasn't too happy by our appearance. He wanted to give you all a message. If any Konoha ninja are found in his lands, they will be killed on sight, regardless of the reason. At this the council was to be in an uproar. In that instant the room was divided. One side wanted to deal with the empire diplomatically, fearing a confrontation if left unchecked. This was born from the fear of Naruto wishing retribution regardless. The other side wanted to completely leave the empire alone and heed the emperor's warning. Cut all ties and never attempt communicate with the empire again, fearing rightly that they could anger the blonde at their presence and bring it upon the village. Well, it seems the young Uzumaki is now the most power ruler on the continent. It's a pity, I was hoping for an alliance to survive. It seems we will fight this war alone, the Lord of the Land of Fire mused, deeply disappointed at the fact that their greatest hope to survive had been dashed. He thought that if he personally asked for his help instead, and perhaps inform him that he help him survive Konoha wrath, then perhaps he could reconsider. After Tsunade shouted for the council to be quiet, Danzo was the first of the council to make his voice heard by all other members. Well, it seems that the final nail has been brought to our coffin, he mused. He will most probably plan his own invasion of Konoha if he wished, thus is now the power he possesses. As such, it may be best that we somehow deal with the emperor in some form or another. While it may be highly risky, if all else fails, then the need to eliminate him may be the final option for us if we fail to try and appease him. Several civilian councilmen agreed to this. At this Kakashi spoke up to the council. Naruto will not attack Konoha, as said he feels he should not get involved in this war. Essentially, if we do nothing, then he won't come for us. How do we know what he said is true? Hiyashi asked the Jonin. For all we know he could want us to believe he would not attack us, then he plans for an invasion. After all, surely he would hold a grudge to us for what he did to him in the past. It is a wonder if he would seek revenge. But even so we have no military force to deal with the empire. All our resources are currently dealing with the war with the Northern Alliance. As such, to try and fight a possible war on two fronts would be disastrous. I say we heed this warning and don't tempt the Western Dragon, Inochi argued. At this several other members nodded their heads in agreement. Seeing this now I really think it would have been best to put that demon down when we had the chance. Now we may now have to deal with a second war. The third Hokage was too soft on that thing. No, once again its shadow looms over us once more. As such I think we should find a way to deal with this threat personally, Sum spoke out. How she hated Naruto, thinking him to be the beast itself. Then again, due to her lack of knowledge on seals, it was an easy mistake to make. Now this hatred had turned to fear of retaliation. At this Kiba was shaking with rage. He remembered all the hate she used to spur when taking about the blonde, and how he used to, like a loyal son to an infallible mother, believed everything she spoke about. However, upon seeing Naruto and the Kyuubi with his own eyes, he realized how stupid he was. Now he was determined to correct those mistakes. Oh, for God's sake, shut up, Mom. Everyone turned to Kiba, who looked extremely angry with his mother. You are the reason he hates us, we all are. But do you think we stand a chance against an empire? Have some sense. Your hatred would bring down this village and kill us all. He roared. Sum was shocked at her son's outburst. He was defending the demon. He is right, Tsunade intervened. He is at the head of a country which takes over far more than even half the size of the continent. The eastern continents combined would not compare to their size. Attacking him now, with other enemies against us, would be suicide. I've seen his forces in action, and I admit it wasn't pretty. Everyone turned to the new voice in the room, a white-haired man who suddenly appeared in the chambers. Jiraiya, the Hokage whispered. She hadn't seen him after Naruto exile. The Sannin continued on his own debrief unhindered. His forces are both well equipped, trained and organized. If he wanted to launch an invasion of the East countries, there is a high chance he would actually succeed. He has a large variety of troop types to combat all situations, and his own ninja easily rival our own. But Naruto has a greater weapon than that. What weapon, Jiraiya-san? The elderly Koharu asked, concerned deeply for the fact they were essentially powerless to do anything. Loyalty, he replied, that is their weapon. They would all gladly give their lives for the boy. It is their way of repaying them for the freedom he granted them. Freedom from the chaos of war. They now know a peace that was never experienced on the major part of the continent. They now see Naruto as their savior and would gladly fight for him, kill for him, give their lives for him. Then it would be best for us not to involve ourselves with the Empire and heed the Emperor's warning. It would be our best bet. Since we are already in one war, to provoke another would definitely end the Land of Fire. Sasuke spoke, essentially spelling out to the council what needed to be done. While they did not like the fact of being powerless, it was the logical and sensible thing to do, and thus many, with a grumble, conceded. As this took place, Kakashi began walking towards the Hokage. He reached for his pocket, and pulled out a scroll. The Emperor wanted me to give you this, Hokage-sama. Tsunade took it from his hand, and was about to open it. Where is Hinata? Hiashi asked, his look one of displeasure. Before Kakashi could reply, Kiba cut in. She's with Naruto now, and she no longer has the branch mark, and there is nothing you can do about it. However, it's funny you only just realized, must show how much you don't care about her. At this the council were mortified. The Byakugan is in the hands of another. Then we will retrieve her. One less experienced member of the council. He was however quickly shot down by the older members. Hiashi tried to keep himself under control since this was essentially the worst case scenario had come to pass for the clan. Not only had he lost a member who possessed the bloodline, and apparently no longer sealed as well, but he also lost any political influence he could have possessed. You will do no such thing. Tsunade replied in rage, it will cause war with the Empire. I will not allow you to jeopardize this village's safety any more than what has already happened. You must agree though, Hokage-sama, we cannot let the Byakugan fall into the hands of another without it having at least some control over the matter. Even so, the fact that the Byakugan is out of our hands could prove deadly in future, even so we could try and use this to our advantage. If we can to Hinata, then perhaps we can manipulate her to get to Naruto, one of the elders, Koharu argued. Before she could reply, a demonic aura was felt in the chambers, one that was very familiar to the adults in the room. The daimyo was ready to speak about this situation, but was cut off by a voice of old. I don't think that is a good idea, especially when trying to deal against a superior foe. Suddenly the scroll that Suand held burst into flames. She yelped in pain and let it drop to the floor. The flames grew bigger and bigger, a form began to take shape. Suddenly the aura was recognized by the older people in the group, and were in terror at what was here, in this chamber. The form was that of a large red fox, complete with 9 tails, before taking a human form. Sasuke was the first to gain his voice, realizing whom it was that caused all the adults to tremble in fear. Kyuubi, the fox, merely grinned cruelly back at the scared spectators of his dramatic appearance. All was quiet on the border fort in the Western Empire, one of the many forts that protected its boundaries against the east. The guards were both relaxed and alert, not expecting any form of attack. It was in fact time for the changeover of the guards, so some could rest, and let the others take their place. It was here the forts were most vulnerable. They were complacent, and overconfident. They believed that no one would attack an outsized empire. So they went completely unprepared when an unknown force suddenly attacked them. The border forces tried to put up a fight, grabbing their weapons and sounding the alarms to alert the rest of the Ashigaru soldiers in the fort, but the surprise attack took them completely off guard, and they fell one by one. Soon the fort was ablaze, burning the dead and wounded within. The attack moved like lightning, and hit like solid stone, only lasting just over 15 minutes, caused by this experienced foe. Soon an army from the east began to march unopposed past the burning foe, hell-bent on taking on the empire for personal gain, hoping to move with speed to end the war quickly by striking deep into the heart of the great nation. The cheers of victory were filled in the air. They now believed that nothing would stop them now. Similar attacks on forts took place all along the central border and the army moved across. Unfortunately for those responsible for the attack, the sentinels were on alert, and saw it all from beginning to end. A violent knock on the emperor's chamber was hard. Naruto on his part was irritated for the fact his time with his fiancée was interrupted. But alas, duty called. This won't take long, he told Hinata, who smiled patiently in response. Naruto turned to the door. Come in. The knocker was Ihei Lord Kazuma. His stance told the young emperor that whatever he wanted to see him about, it was serious. What is the meaning of this interruption, Kazuma-san? He tried to keep his voice calm. His irritation was lost when he saw that his sentinel leader spoke in tone never as serious as it was before. Your Imperial Majesty, my sentinels report that several border forts on the eastern border were attacked and destroyed. An army from the east has also appeared crossing the border which has been penetrated. Naruto jumped up, shock and disbelief on his face. Hinata gasped in shock, putting a hand to her mouth. The emperor's shock turned to rage. Whoever did this was going to pay. Who was responsible? He gritted out in rage. Kazuma summoned his sphere to show his majesty. As he watched, Naruto couldn't believe it. He had the guts to attack him. He watched as the forts were burned to the ground, and an army began to march over the border. Watching this, he could help but feel stupid at the fact he felt invisible and complacent at thinking that the East would not attack the Empire. Seeing this, however, brought home to him that war was now on the table. He would now have to involve himself in this war. The forces were of ninja and samurai, and they had the symbol of the stone on their headband. It was Iwakager. It was the land of earth. No one dared to move in the council chambers, too scared to move in fact, for the demonic killing intent was overwhelming. The civilian members were literally cowering under their desks, while the shinobi were rooted into place. The Sannin, Jiraiya and Tsunade were trying to keep calm at the feeling being enveloped around the room. The daimyo too was rooted into place, he guards trying to make a barrier to protect him, but also frozen stiff. Standing in front of them all was the Kyuubi, now in human form, grinning at them all, enjoying their discomfort. All in the room were either deeply unnerved or downright scared by the appearance of the nine-tailed demon fox, the same fox that attacked this village nearly 20 years ago. Well, it seems the arrogance of Konoha still exists, Kyuubi taunted. How pathetic. You consider yourselves to be the greatest of all the 5 shinobi villages, yet now you find yourselves alone and needing help from others to survive. Pitiful, isn't it, that the mighty have fallen? After saying that, the killing intent ceased, allowing the room's inhabitants to finally breathe and move. The demon fox turned to the daimyo, and surprisingly gave a respectful bow, much to the confusion of the council. The daimyo, not wanting to get on the demon's bad side, bowed in return. What are you doing here? What happened to the seal? Inochi finally stuttered out, trying to collect himself from essentially experiencing hell. The demon turned to him, and smiled his demonic grin, causing the Yamanaka head to pale slightly. Naruto released me of his own free will after learning its mechanics. The reason for that is that myself and him get along very well together, Kyuubi stressed the words. The council's eyes widened at this revelation. Tsunade, however, looked unconvinced. Why would he release you, demon? One who was the cause of his pain all his life? She asked in a cold tone. She hoped he had not just sent Kyuubi here to finish the job 19 years ago. Kyuubi, however, just laughed at the Hokage's arrogance. Why should I reply to someone who betrayed his trust? You say it was me who caused his pain, but it was you who made the decision to make his life a misery. The fifth Hokage flinched at the statement made, knowing it to be true. After that retort, he turned to face the council, who had by now had recovered from his killing intent. Danzo, in his dark vision of Konoha, finally saw his chance to seize power once and for all. You fool Kyuubi, by coming here you have become my unwilling slave. Now submit to me and to my grand vision. He spoke with triumph as he stood up and pulled of his head bandage, and to the horror of those in the room, his hidden eye revealed the infamous Sharingan. At seeing this, Sasuke stood up in rage. How do you have the Sharingan? Danzo gave a small smile in response. How he wanted to get under the last loyal Uchiha's skin. Kyuubi growled at seeing this. Despicable. You have no respect for the dead. Sasuke roared in hatred as he leapt from his chair to charge at the old war hawk. Danzo easily knocked him down, his drawn sword at his throat. Tsunade tried to regain control. Danzo, what is the meaning of this? Danzo turned to her. Your reign ends today, woman. I will take over Konoha and will rise to become the greatest empire on this continent. Once I win this war, the empire will be next, he gloated. The daimyo was now deeply concerned by the turn of events. He did not need the empire on his back if this man got what he wanted. I will not let you do that, Danzo-san. You will find this village's budget cut if you declare war on the Western Empire. Danzo, however, was not fazed at this threat. His dreams were now, in his mind, close to reality. He would not let the ruler of Fire Country stand in his way. My lord, with the Kyuubi at my beck and call, Konoha will rise to great heights never seen before. With this, Fire Country will also rise to greatness. Is that not what you want, my lord? The daimyo shook his head in reply. I will not anger the Emperor of the West, who essentially could control the whole continent. Even with the demon fox under your command, this is a fool's errand. Again, I must ask that you stop this at once. Danzo looked displeased at this. It seems he would not receive any aid from the Lord of Fire. The old fool. Then, my lord, you will have to go too, I'm afraid. At this threat, the guards went between them. Tsunade was not having this. Like Sasuke, she charged him. Danzo swung his blade, going through Tsunade at an angle. She fell, not gravely injured, but incapacitated. Jiraiya went to his teammate's aid. Hokage-sama. Anbu came down surrounding the old man. However, with a signal, his root force appeared all around the council chamber. They also appeared around the council members, their swords at their throats. When I have control of the Kyuubi, you will all have the choice of either joining me for my grand vision, or fall before the winds of change. Soon Konoha will dominate its enemies, and it will become the greatest nation on earth. Even greater than the Western Empire. Danzo's patriotic rant was stopped, however he soon stopped when he heard laughter. Turning to the source, he found it to be the demon lord who was laughing, seemingly finding this situation hilarious. To Danzo's confusion, the laughter died down, and the demon was smiling directly at him. Emphasize the word if, old man, he gloated. Angered, he roared at the demon. You will do as I say. He tried to put a genjutsu onto him, in an attempt to control the demon lord. At this, however, demon laughed once more. Pitiful fool. He raised his gloved hand, in which marking on the backhand of the glove were glowing. You have to control over me. At this Danzo's eyes widened in shock. How could this be? This shock however soon turned to horror. The demon lord extended his hand towards the old hands, and a force was sent his way. In a reflexive move he brought his armored arm in an attempt to block the attack. The blast forced him of his feet, and the armor around his arm shattered to pieces. Into the horror of the denizens of the chamber, revealed to all of them his dark secret. His arm, Kiba muttered in shock. His arm contained the Sharingans of all the deceased members of the Uchiha clan. It was obvious to the members of the council that Danzo had not taken just one eye, but all of them. Kyuubi growled in annoyance. You really do disgust me, old man. I guess I'm going to have to rid this world of your filth. Before he could react, he felt another strong, invisible force. This time it pushed him to the wall, hitting it with a force to cause him to be in a daze. Now witness my power, mortals, the demon lord growled before them. In one motion he raised his hand high and clicked his fingers, fire igniting from the spark caused by energy within. In a sudden surge, fire engulfed the entire root Anbu that were within the chamber. Their screams of anguish could be heard far beyond the walls of the chamber within the mansion, as they attempted in vain to put out the shearing hot flames engulfing their bodies. Within seconds they collapsed to the ground, the flames extinguished, leaving charred remains behind. Kyuubi blew on his fingers in a dramatic motion, acting as if his fingers were hot, in a gesture of mockery to Danzo, who was staring in absolute terror at the power that he attempted to tame. Kyuubi grinned manically at the old man. It's as they say, Danzo, play with fire, and you will get burned. Now it's time to end this, summoning a flaming whip in his hands, and wielded it to be used against the old man. The end of the burning whip wraps around Danzo's neck, shearing his skin and causing screams of anguish. With a forceful tug he pulled Danzo using the whip, forcing the old man from his feet and into the air, and into the path directly in front of the demon fox. With the whip dispersed from his hands, he grabbed Danzo, still flying through the air with a clawed hand that grasped the burnt throat of the old counselor. Danzo tried in vain to release himself from the iron grip of the Nine-Tails hand. No, he refused to fall here, not when though all he wanted was in his grasp, so close to victory. Once again he tried to look into the red eyes of the demon, once again trying to control the power of the Baji using the stolen bloodline of the Uchiha. However, his Sharingan once more had no effect. Kyuubi saw this and decided to end this problem once and for all. With a roar his hand glowed red. With a scream Danzo erupted in flames. It was to last only a few seconds, as he was quickly incinerated. The few ashes that remained flew from his hand and scattered across the council chamber. Nothing remained of the old war hawk of the village hidden in the leaves, only the smell of burnt flesh was to remain. Silence now filled the room, everyone trying to get to grips with the events that just transpired. Danzo was dead, having shown that he had the Sharingans of those who had died during the Uchiha massacre. His root Anbu were also dead, burned to a cinder upon the floor. Sakura had moved to her master's side to heal her wounds. Tsunade and Jiraiya only watched in awe at how easy Danzo, a veteran ninja, had been handled by the Kyuubi no Yoko. The council didn't know whether to be revealed at being saved, or be fearing the might of the demon fox standing in the room. The daimyo was only one of the room's inhabitants to have a smile on his face. Thank you, Kyuubi Dono, for your efforts to deal with this traitor. Kyuubi merely smiled in response. Now, where were we? He mused, before he remembered what he was going to say before the interruption. Ah yes, now I remember. His face turned serious upon looking at the council. I will make this very clear for you, so listen up. I hate repeating myself. Young Naruto does not like the fact that you just think you can ask for his aid and think you will get it. He also does not like the fact you don't think that the past can be ignored. He will not tolerate your presence in his lands, as Kakashi here told you. Any one of your ninja found in the empire will be killed on sight. He turned to Hiashi with cold eyes. As for you Hiyashi Hyuga, I have a warning of my own to give to you personally. If you try anything with Hinata, Hyuga Tem, I will personally hunt you down and kill you. She is with Naruto now and now she no longer has your pathetic branch seal anymore, she's a free bird now. Understand me? He spoke with a clearly threatening tone, his glare going right through the Hyuga head. Hiyashi on his part had to swallow his pride and take the blow, trying to keep his anger in check. Less he wanted to end up like the now deceased old counselor. Kyuubi smiled, knowing he wouldn't retort. His life was worth more than his pride. He suddenly noticed the toad Sanin amongst the residents of the chamber. Ah, Jiraiya, it's good to see you again. Did you enjoy your stay in the Empire? The Sanin nodded. Yes, it was quite interesting to see the rest of the continent to west. I have to say it's not that different from our culture here in the east. I will say there is quite some rural areas down in the southern region. Kyuubi smiled. Good, as the threat also applies to you. Nothing personal of course. Jiraiya frowned. Then again he should have realized being a ninja of Konoha he would have to take the fall along with the rest of the Hidden Leaf village. As such he resigned to the fact that the past had caught up with them all. Kyuubi was not finished with them yet however. I have to ask Tsunade, when you informed all of this village's inhabitants of Naruto's burden, did you mean to inform them of his heritage also, or did you neglect to tell them this piece of information? It was the Hokage who was put on the spot, and her silence was to be her answer. That was all the demon needed to know. Typical. You have to tell them all one thing, but keep the other in the dark. I'm not surprised he hates you all with the way you even now continue to treat him. At this the council went in a roar. Now hold on here Kyuubi, his heritage is one thing which must be kept secret. Homura shouted. Why? It was a simple question, but the answer in fact eluded them. But Kyuubi knew exactly the reason why they refused, even now to reveal his parentage. Since you cannot say, I will tell you. The reason why even now you refuse to tell this village of Naruto's parentage, is because you all knew what it would entail. If word got out that the son of this village's greatest hero was abused and mistreated, then the consequences would be far-reaching. After all, the fourth Hokage had many friends in many neutral countries. The reality of this situation dawned on them. Their pride and arrogance had brought them to the worst possible situation. Now they had to pay the consequences. But suddenly they realized something. Tsunade was to voice their fears. Wait, Kyuubi, don't tell me that you're going, Kyuubi grinned in response. Well, if you're not going to, then I will. The demon burst into flames, blinding the mortals in the room. With a roar he rushed upwards and burst out of the room, out of the mansion, and appeared, in his full, nine-tails form, towering over the whole village. If his appearance did not get everyone's attention, then his deafening roar surely did. Panic ensured around the whole village. The demon had returned to finish the job. Ninja of all ranks began an attempt to surround the towering monster, while the villagers tried to get away from the demon, and into the safe areas of the village. With another roar he addressed the village as a whole. Hear me Konohagukare, village hidden in the leaves, I have returned. After 19 years of being imprisoned and of travel, I have come to deliver a message from my former vessel. At this both ninja and villager alike looked up at the demon in confusion. By now the inhabitants of the chamber had rushed out to join the event, in case a fight against the monster. Tsunade had to be helped by her teammate. Even though most of her wounds were healed, she still was partly incapacitated. He warns you that the past is still in his mind. He still remembers the glares, the threats, the beatings. All because you foolishly believed that I was the boy you so foolishly mistreated in the most terrible ways your kind you could do to a child. For my actions, you condemned my vessel, a vessel who was loyal to your village till you drove him from his home. Now you will suffer for your actions. Kyuubi ranted on to a scared populace. The inhabitants of the village could not believe their ears. The boy was not the demon. Had their hatred blinded them to the truth? Suddenly many began to slowly feel the emotion of regret for their past actions. The sudden realization of their sins to a child made them feel tainted by their acts of wrath. However, when the demon fox said that they would pay for their actions, it made them fearful of what it would do to them. I will not kill you mortals, I will let you live knowing that you have let your deceased loved ones down for dishonoring their sacrifices. Furthermore, I will let you live knowing that you condemned the son of your greatest hero to a hate-filled life. At this the villagers wondered what the demon lord was talking about, while the council looked on, powerless to stop the flow of information about to surge. Your council has kept you the dark to the truth, had put a blind fold to the fact that Naruto Uzumaki, vessel of yours truly, was also the son of Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage. At this revelation the people of Konoha nearly recoiled in horror. A collective gasp was heard throughout the village. Ninja and villager alike. The daimyo shook his head. He knew that Naruto was the son of Minato. That was why he saved him from the council upon Jiraiya's request. He never asked for the council to reveal Naruto's heritage as he felt it was their responsibility, not his. Upon having it revealed like this, it would create dire consequences for the future. As I said, I will not destroy your pitiful village. No, I will leave in your disgrace for your disregard of your past heroes. In fact, looking at your monument, you shouldn't have one on there for the fact you do not deserve him. You take your heroes for granted. When they have a final wish, you do not heed it. So I will tell you now that your disregard of your heroes will not be take. With that he flung one of his tails towards the monument, more specifically, the head of the fourth Hokage. His red tail clashed with the stone, smashing it apart with great force. The blocks from the stone head crashed down into the village buildings below. People below screamed, trying to get away from the falling debris. Will the chaos ensured, Kyuubi spoke on last time. Let this hold in your monument be a reminder for your failures, and your arrogance. Now you stand alone, hated in a world you're spurred and angered. If you survive you will never rise to greatness. This is the end for you all. The cries of the past have now caught up with you, and now you reap what you sow. See in hell, foolish mortals. With that he once more burst into flames. The heat caused those near him to recoil due to the heat.